Some games do age like a good wine, meaning they stand the test of time, they still feel fresh, and they are able to compete with similar titles even though they might have been out for years. Some games even evolved during that period of time, meaning improving, and also managed to keep a healthy player base among other things. But some games do feel a bit outdated in comparison with other newer games, and even though I did make a video about the free-to-play shooter format known as Warface not too long ago, I did feel that I needed to return and see and feel how the game plays now in the beginning of 2024, after they also changed the name of the game from Warface to Warface Clutch. And also check out the updates that came with the new seasonal update, meaning Northern Lights. I wanted to see if I still feel and believe that Warface in its current state is a free-to-play shooter that I do believe is worth playing also in the beginning here of 2024. And in this video I'm solely talking about the PvP experience of Warface. I've played Warface on and off since the release back in 2013. Later on, Crytek announced in 2019 that Warface's development team, led by the studio's creative director Michael Camson, would be forming its own independent development studio called Blackwood Games. So Blackwood took over all further development of the Warface franchise, including all previously announced updates. Fast forward then to today, since Warface now has gone through a name change, and with that also made some updates and changes in the game. The developer says that the rename is a part of a gradual process of improving the game. They have, for example, added new content from the PC version over to the console version, since they wanted to ensure that the PC and console versions are matching in both content and patches. They've also talked about a new audio and visual feedback when you do hit a headshot in the game. Not sure if it's already in the game yet, since I didn't really see or hear a difference yet when making this video. Alongside with that, Blackwood is also implementing a new ranked match system, some new weapons, and also updates when it comes to the new contract system. It sounds good on the paper, but how much of a difference is it really when you come back and play the game again? Not a big difference if you ask me, if I'm gonna be straight honest, at least not if you like me aren't playing the game on a regular basis. Instead, I feel or believe that one of the problems still maybe with Warface is lack of content for quite some time, something that unfortunately happens with many games, especially if we're talking about a 10-year-old game. But it would have been nice to see some new maps maybe, and maybe even a new game mode or two in Warface. The first things that comes to mind when I start to play is the fact that even though there's updates also trying to make things a bit more fair in the game, when we're talking about equal opportunities and possibilities when playing Warface, it still strikes me that the game suffers from a pay-to-win situation. At least that's what I feel about it. I know that some might disagree, saying that some weapons for sure can be achieved also by playing in order to unlock them, but please remember that the definition of pay-to-win is the practice of paying to get weapons, gear, gadgets, abilities, etc. that gives you an advantage over players who do not spend real money in the game. And again, even though the same gun can be achieved by playing the game, meaning grinding to unlock it, it's still pay to win if it's a shortcut that you're able to take by paying money for it instead. And even though this is something the developers has tried to tone down a bit, you might say, for example, by gifting some golden guns, etc. once in a while, the pay to win advantage is still there in the actual gunplay or in gameplay, and you'll notice it quite early on, which I do believe will scare off new players that might try out the game for the first time. And I do believe it has been hurting the game in the long run as well when it comes to active players or and player count. Of course, you have to be good if you're going to use these so-called better weapons or meta weapons in the game as well. I mean, if you are bad at FPS games, not even a good gun will help you out that much. But I noticed quite a difference during the hours I played when making this video, when I also was switching between weapons in my inventory. But it's also important to say that if you are an experienced gamer or a player, FPS player, you are able to do well without spending any money in the game, at least in the beginning to a certain point before you are reaching the higher ranks in Warface. Another thing that I'm not a fan of is the armor in Warface. I can't really remember if it has been a thing all along since the start or if it was something that was added later on. But alongside with some weapon meta, or armor kind of tilts the balance in the game to a certain degree. At least that's my opinion. Let me hear what you think. But with that said, alongside with briefly describing the pay-to-win situation in Warface, I do prefer how the game played and felt some years ago. I mean, it's easy to forget, but I believe the gameplay or gunplay felt a bit more balanced back then. Please fill in here what you think about this. And even though the Steam charts aren't perfect, it might still give us PC players at least a hint how the game is performing when it comes to active players. Bear in mind that there are still people playing Warface directly via the launcher and not through Steam. But even so, we can see that there has been around 580 players on average the last 30 days, which is a small decrease of players since October last year, and almost half of the player count compared to what you can find if you go back and check the numbers during the spring of 2023. So even though Blackwood is now trying to make a kind of a facelift, you might say, when it comes to partly renaming their game and make improvements, we still can't see that it has been pulling back players into the game. It's more the opposite, at least for now, but who knows, maybe with time and even more updates, some former Warface players might want to go back and check out what's new, at least partly new in the game. I also need to add that there are cheaters to be found in Warface as well, which isn't surprising being a free-to-play online shooter. Not spending more time on that topic for now, but at least I've said it and mentioned it. I talked a bit about a good wine and how it can become better as it becomes older, and I'll get back to that again, since I unfortunately feel that Warface hasn't been standing the test of time that well. If the game's going to truly improve and be able to attract more players again, they would need to improve things such as netcode, servers, maybe hitboxes even, when it comes to the gameplay experience, and rework the whole monetization system in order to make it a cosmetic thing only, which I don't think is possible this late in the life cycle of Warface. And not to mention the fact that the game is running on the first version of CryEngine, so the graphics are pretty outdated as well. Doesn't bother me so much, but I'm sure that many newer, younger FPS gamers would like to see the game reach up higher towards today's visuals and graphics standards. But I'm not sure if such a overhaul is worth it or even technically possible when it comes to Warface. Maybe they would be better off to make a sequel, or Warface 2 instead, based on a new graphics engine and with a modern monetization system, better overall balance and performance as mentioned above. So with that said, it will take some time, at least for me, before I log into Warface again. There are other options, meaning games out there available that offers a similar FPS experience but plays overall better than Warface. So I believe I'll go with that instead. Don't think for a second though that I hate Warface or dislike it for that sake, because I don't. As a matter of fact, I've had many good moments in Warface, something that can both be seen and heard in many of my older Warface videos. But time flies, and here we are in the beginning of 2024, so I have to be honest and say that I don't believe that Warface is neither worth your time and money for that sake here in the beginning of 2024. But as always, I say all games aren't for everyone, and maybe you are still playing and enjoying Warface. So feel free to share your thoughts and comments. And thanks also for watching, and I'll talk to you soon again in another FPS video here on my channel. So, cheers!